And thank you, all of you, for joining us on this special weekend. And so I hope tomorrow you will enjoy a great day, but also I hope you think about all the people who've given their life so that we can enjoy our holiday weekend. Even my brother who served in the U.S. Army for 20 years. And I'm sure many of you also know somebody who's served for our country. So for those of you who may have joined us for the first time, my name is Dr. Sung Won. I'm a surgeon, but also I practice regenerative medicine. That means it's like stem cell therapy and also lifestyle medicine. And I'll tell you briefly about how I got into the field of lifestyle medicine. Since I was very young, my passion has always been biohacking, how to optimize the health so that we can increase the longevity. Humans have the ability to live until 120. However, we damage our body way too early to even have an opportunity to live very long. But while I was practicing medicine, I was doing minimally invasive surgery, and I got tremendous amount of exposure to radiation because we were one of the early adapters and developing and pioneering a lot of the new techniques. And unfortunately, we did get a lot of exposure. And one of my dear friends who was an anesthesiologist who passed away at mid-40s with a lung cancer, and he's never smoked before. And at that time, it was a awakening moment. And I did even a deeper dive into a research on how to really optimize our health, but also for selfish reason, how to prevent cancer. Because I've always thought that someday I will have cancer. And what I've discovered was that we all live with cancer cells in our body. But what we do with it really, with our lifestyle, we can prevent what we call clinically significant cancer. Because everyone should really know that they have cancer cells in their body. Okay, and so that's how I came to this stage. Okay, and once I discovered it, I realized there was so many information that I learned through the research that I didn't learn when I was in medical school. Okay, in med school we learned how to manage the disease, but not necessarily to really prevent it or even to cure it. And the answer's been there, as you will see in tonight's presentation, that we've known about, even for diabetes, how to better manage and how to reverse diabetes since early 1900s. But yet we're still struggling properly managing. But nobody seems to be really focusing on how to prevent diabetes or even reversing the diabetes. And so those are the information that I wanted to share with everyone. Just like I said, the heart attack is really a choice for most people, 95 to 98% of the time. Type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes is mostly a choice. Granted that most people don't know and have the information about how to prevent and reverse. But after today, I hope you'll gain more knowledge. And due to the time today, we're only really scratching the surface. And to get you to spark the interest, and so that you can start doing your own research. And also, if you want further help, you can definitely reach out to us because we do have disease reversal program. But many people can do this on their own. And there's a lot of information that you can find on the internet. You have to be very careful because just about anyone can go out there and write, an article, and everyone seems to be an expert. So just be really cautious. Okay, and Neogen Clinic is our lifestyle medicine and longevity clinic located in Dallas. Our mission is to help individuals achieve the most optimal health so that you can live longer, but also live better as well. And we have a group of physicians who practice different aspects of lifestyle medicine to help achieve that. Okay? So question is this. How many of you know someone who's living with diabetes? And I would imagine that would be quite a bit. And if you do know, just say yes on the chat. So really like to know that I'm going to be asking some of the questions. So if you can participate, I would certainly appreciate that. Okay? Yeah, I bet most people do know someone with the type 2 diabetes, and how many of you really think that type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes is a choice? And a lot of people do think that when I speak of such a things, even let's say heart attack is a choice, they think I'm really harsh, and that it is not a choice. And a lot of people believe that it's genetics or different reasons, But I truly believe that once you gain the knowledge, that it really is a choice. And so I'd like to see how many of you agree or disagree with my thoughts. Okay, some of you do, some of you have a different thoughts. So, but that's great. So this is not about just purely me lecturing, and this is, we call it Zoom, hangout, because we want to be able to have freely share knowledge, share our opinions, ask questions, and this is a type of platform and community that we would like to develop. Okay? And if you've been with us before, you've seen this number. Top 10 causes of death in U.S. is really, number one is the heart disease, and here you see the top 10. Number 2, cancer. You got the stroke, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. But every single one of these top 10 causes can be prevented, and then can be also, and mostly even be reversed. Okay, but we really, no matter what, and we're talking about diabetes, but we also have to respect the number one killer of Americans and also the rest of the world population, which is heart disease, and including patients with diabetes. So number one killer of people living with diabetes is also heart disease. Okay? So nearly 2/3 of diabetics die from heart attack or stroke. So they, from cardiovascular disease, which is a pretty tremendous amount of number, right? And so not many people really die from diabetic itself, although it is still the top 10 cause, but diabetes leads to other disease. And such as, you may go blind because it's a vascular issues. You may develop kidney failure, and heart attack, as we talked about, stroke, and then wound complication that leads to the amputation. Every single one of these are really preventable. And so, but it is a tragic that when I was, working at the hospital, I've seen so many patients just battling this disease, but everyone forgets to really address the root cause of the problem. Okay? And diabetes is one of the top major risk factor for heart attack and stroke. And we talked about how high blood pressure is the number one risk factor for heart attack and stroke. And then after that, you got diabetes, high cholesterol, smoking, obesity, and every single one of them can be prevented and then be reversed, including diabetes. And 50% of the Americans are now either diabetic or pre-diabetic. And this number has been predicted for a long time. And they said it was by 2020, and 2020 is here. And I believe we're right at 50%. And this is very concerning. But the diabetes is not stopping there. The rise and increase in prevalence of diabetes has been tremendously since 1950s, and the slope is getting steeper and steeper and steeper to a point in next 25 years. Okay? Even in U.S., there will be further increase of 35% of diabetes in this country. But countries like the continents like Africa, there'll be 156% increase. The rest of the world overall, close to 50% increase in prevalence of diabetes over the next 25 years. So this is a significant crisis. But also relating this to the current events. And I'm sure many of you now heard that the severity of the COVID-19 is directly related to pre-existing condition. So if you're suffering from chronic disease, such as high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, and pulmonary disease, your risk of developing a severe course increases pretty significantly, from 3 to 4 times. Also, your risk of being admitted to the ICU rises pretty significantly as well. And if you have emphysema, which is a pulmonary disease, most commonly from smoking, you're nearly 18 times the odds of being admitted to the ICU, but also diabetes as well. And we saw this when we were dealing with SARS and MERS, previous infections, that you develop significantly higher risk of developing a severe course with those virus infections. But the same is true for the COVID-19 as well. So if you are able to better manage all the chronic disease, then even you come in contact with COVID-19 and even you get infected, you have a much, much better chance of riding through and surviving through the COVID-19. Okay. And then also obesity. And this is a big crisis in this country. And even with COVID-19, the people with the body mass index of 28, and some people may argue that BMI is not necessarily the best way to measure. However, whether it's the best or not, it still gives us a pretty good idea the health status of an individual. And what they're referring to is if somebody works out a lot and they have a lot of muscles, their BMI may be very high because they have heavy muscles. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about the general population. But what it showed was if you have BMI of 28 or greater, you have nearly 6 times the odds of developing severe course from the COVID-19. But average BMI in US exceeds 29, and 80% of Americans are either overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. And this has been the part of the problem. And with obesity, that also leads to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. And mostly due to the standard American diet. And as I mentioned before, 53% coming from the processed food, 32% from the animal-based products, and then only 11% from fruits and vegetables. And almost 50% of the fruits and vegetables consist of French fries and ketchup. And this is one of the main reasons why Americans are suffering from so much chronic disease, and we're exporting the chronic disease to other countries. Okay? So in order to reverse diabetes without drugs, this is very possible for majority of the patients. So then we have to understand what the type 2 diabetes is. But in order to understand what the type 2 diabetes is, we also have to understand what insulin resistance is. Okay? So can you guys tell me that what causes insulin resistance? Just, if you have an idea, just type it in. And so, some people may think it may be related to genetics. Some people may think, well, if you go to the internet, most people think that you develop insulin resistance or diabetes because you consume too much carbohydrates. So you might think that. Or is it because you take too much protein and you do low carb diet and then eat too much protein? So many people are obsessed with protein. But fat, is it because you're consuming too much fat? So we'd love for you to participate and then, let me know your thought. And so no judgment here. Okay? So I'll give you the simple answer. So there are a few things that are really responsible. It's multifactorial. There's a lot of different things that cause insulin resistance, but here are some of the major things that causes the insulin resistance. It's simply it's the storage of fat in the tissues that are not necessarily designed to store the fat, and such as a liver and skeletal muscles. So when we consume tremendous amount of fat and then it gets deposited into the cells, then it's called intramyocellular lipids. And then we'll be talking a little bit more about that. And then also that it interferes with the function of the mitochondria that causes mitochondrial dysfunction. So combination of these things really interferes with the biochemistry of insulin and blood sugar that leads to insulin resistance. So simply put it, if you think that, hey, it's the fat inside the cell, which medical community call intramyocellular lipids, we always have to make it difficult, and that is one of the main reasons of insulin resistance. Okay? And so, the second most important cause of insulin resistance is nitric oxide insufficiency. And nitric oxide, it was considered a miracle molecule, and it was developed by, found and discovered by 3 American scientists, and they won a Nobel Prize in 1998. And it's one of the most important molecules for our cardiovascular system, but it has so many different roles, including making you insulin sensitive. And so by having an insufficiency of nitric oxide, that will lead to insulin resistance. Okay? And thirdly, the insulin resistance is also caused by mitochondria dysfunction. And many of you may have learned this in high school biology. The mitochondria is a powerhouse or power cell inside our cells. Okay? But then if you have dysfunction of mitochondria, many people develop insulin resistance. But also the interesting thing is that if you have mitochondria dysfunction, if you have insulin resistance, it also causes further mitochondria dysfunction. So you get into this perpetual cycle. Okay? So most physicians, when you go to your family medicine doctors or general practitioners, they may be screening you for prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. But most physicians, and this is what we learned in medical school, that insulin resistance really is only related to prediabetes and type 2 diabetes only. However, the insulin resistance not only touches the type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and gestational diabetes, but it goes much further than that. And insulin, if you have insulin resistance, it can affect so many other areas in your body. So not just the type 1, type 2 gestational diabetes, it can also negatively affect and increased risk of developing cancer, of course, cardiovascular disease that also leads to high cholesterol that leads to coronary artery disease. And they've also many of the brain dysfunction, including Alzheimer's disease. Sometimes scientists consider Alzheimer's disease almost the type 3 diabetes, and some believe that is mostly a vascular related, which are vascular problem is very closely related to insulin resistance. So as I said before, a lot of diseases are multifactorial. But for guys also, if you have insulin resistance, you significantly increase risk of developing erectile dysfunction. There's also insulin resistance leads to vascular disease that leads to erectile dysfunction. So interesting fact there. But most importantly, insulin resistance significantly increased the heart disease risk. And there's many of the very important scientific papers have been written and studied how the insulin resistance affects the heart disease as well. So, and this is something that we really need to pay close attention to. But one of the main things that insulin resistance comes from is the dysfunction of the liver and skeletal muscles. As I mentioned before, it's the intramyocellular lipids fat inside the cell, okay, where it's not supposed to be storing the fat, and that is the skeletal muscle and then also the liver. And when you have too much fat inside these cells, they're not able to function properly. They're not able to accept the blood sugar that is inside the blood into their cells, and that causes the insulin resistance. Okay? So when we consume any food, most people think it's when you consume carbohydrate that your body releases insulin, but that is true. However, also if you're eating a protein or fat, it also triggers your pancreas to release insulin as well. And when your body does release the insulin is like a key, okay? And key to a door, and tries to unlock the door so that the blood, the glucose inside the blood can actually get into the cell, especially the skeletal muscle, and then also the liver cells. But if you have too much fat inside the cell, then it really, the fat itself mucks up the keyhole and then disrupt this insulin and the glucose transporter pathway. and that prevents the glucose from coming into the cell. And this is what insulin resistance is. Okay? Too much fat disrupting the insulin and glucose transporter pathway and preventing the glucose to come inside the cell. Because basically what your body, each individual cell is saying is that fat is a storage of energy. And if you have too much fat inside the cell, then your cell is signaling, hey, I have way, way too much energy inside the cell, and causes a traffic jam. It says, do not come in, because glucose is another source of energy saying that we can't take it anymore. We have way too much energy inside the cell. And so then the end result is that your blood sugar it will be rising, okay? So again, accumulation of fat in the muscle and liver traps the glucose in the blood, therefore your blood sugar elevates. Also, if you have a deficiency of nitric oxide, and which we'll go in a little bit further, then that also increases insulin resistance. Because what happens is that one of the function of nitric oxide is to actually place the glucose 4, which is essentially a door that the glucose can come in. And nitric oxide's role is to place this door onto the cellular membrane. And so if you don't have a door on the wall, even you approach the wall, you can't go inside, right? And so it's like having a house without the door. You can't get inside the house. And nitric oxide plays a very important role for that. And if you have a decrease in nitric oxide, you can't place a door, therefore you increase the insulin resistance. And this is another reason for insulin resistance. And I bet most of the conversation that you may have with the family practitioner and general practitioner, they may not necessarily talk to you about these facts because many of them do not know. And certainly when I was in medical school and residency, these are not the things that we talked about, because we only really talked about how to manage and lower the blood sugar, but we didn't really talk about the true cause of the insulin resistance. Okay. So, but also, if you have a deficiency of nitric oxide, that increases your risk of developing insulin resistance. But also, if you have insulin resistance, that also negatively affects the nitric oxide production. So just like the mitochondria, you get into this perpetual cycle. So if you have a high level of glucose, that directly inhibits the production of nitric oxide by an enzyme that produces nitric oxide within the endothelial cell. And so nitric oxide is mostly produced at the inner lining of your blood vessel. So then if you have high level of blood sugar, that directly inhibits that endothelial cells from producing the nitric oxide. And then, of course, then if you have insufficiency of nitric oxide, that increases insulin resistance. So you get into this perpetual cycle. Okay. So also, as we age, we naturally lose the ability to produce nitric oxide. So by the time you're age 40, you lose about 50%. And by the time you are 60, you lose about 85%. And nitric oxide is one of the most important vasodilator, which is very, very important for our cardiovascular system because it allows us to deliver more oxygen and nutrients. But without it, then we're going to develop the cardiovascular disease. So the reason why we lose the ability to produce nitric oxide is also because as we age, we damage the blood vessel by developing atherosclerosis and then damaging the inner lining of the cell. So then we lose the ability to produce nitric oxide. Okay, so most patients who have type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes or insulin resistance, and when you go to your physicians, most commonly they recommend low-carb diet. If you go to the internet, one of the most common treatment method that's recommended is the low-carb diet. And what they're doing is they're trying to just manage the disease. You are lowering the blood sugar level by eliminating consumption of glucose, right? And so that is merely putting a Band-Aid on the problem. You're not really dealing with the real source. So by not eating carbohydrate, does it lower the blood sugar? Yeah, of course it does. However, does it really address the insulin resistance, the core cause? So many of the studies show that it does not. So, and these days, a very popular diet is a ketogenic diet or low carb diet. And so by avoiding a carbohydrate, they can keep the blood sugar decreased. However, as soon as you give them a banana, their blood sugar skyrockets because they're so insulin resistant. So is this really fixing the problem? And so they may be lowering the blood sugar. However, they're still developing cardiovascular disease and many other chronic disease. Okay. And so you're merely masking the problem, the insulin resistance. And this doesn't really increase the sensitivity. So our goal and mission is to elevate insulin sensitivity and then eliminate the insulin resistance. Okay, and also there are a lot of studies being done now that shows that the low carbohydrates, low carb diet also is significant, is associated with the significantly high risk of all-cause mortality. And this study have shown that it increases the risk if you're dying early by 30%. So most people go into the low carb diet so that they can lose weight, but what they don't really realize is initially they're losing the glycogen, which means then they're gonna lose mostly water weight. And then after that, most people can't sustain the low carb diet, so then they quickly regain the weight. And then meanwhile, if you're on the prolonged low carb diet, you increase risk of all-cause mortality. So this is really negatively affecting your longevity, right? So Bob Harper, who's a celebrity trainer, who was the star of the show Biggest Loser, who helped many people lose a lot of weight in this show. Okay? And if you look at him, he looks extremely healthy, right? He's fit, he's muscular, he's lean, and he was promoting high-fat diet. And here is at the Rachel show, demonstrating how to make bulletproof coffee, which is a coffee mixed in with a coconut oil and butter. Because the oil and obviously the water doesn't mix, you have to actually put it in the blender and blend the coconut oil and butter into the coffee. Okay? And he was doing the ketogenic diet, and this is what happened. At age 51, he had a massive heart attack when he was working out at the gym. And he would have been dead if it wasn't for a cardiologist that happened to be working out at the gym at the same time, and they were able to revive him. Okay? And then after that, now he wrote a book called High Carb Diet, because he finally learned that you can't really do a the high fat diet in order to prevent cardiovascular disease. Also, he himself is one of the 30% of the population that has a higher level of LP little a. It's one of the conditions that we talked about at the last webinar. And so it gives him more reason to do more of a high carbohydrate diet and low fat diet. And a lot of people are on the low carb, high fat diet because they think that it's going to expedite the fat loss. Well, that doesn't really make sense, right? How can you lose more fat by eating more fat? And so NIH actually did the study and comparing the low carb diet versus a low fat diet for the fat loss per day. And it demonstrated that by doing a low fat diet, you actually lost more fat. That seems like a common sense to me, but NIH had to spend millions of dollars to actually do the study. Okay? But also, this is an Adventist study. The number shows 60,000, but now they have over 90,000 people who have participated. And only group of people who is within the normal body mass index, less than 25, were the people who were eating purely plant-based, not vegetarian, not pescatarian, not semi-vegetarian, and then omnivores. Okay, and then also is a plant-based population that had the lowest incidence and prevalence of type 2 diabetes. So I think you may be getting an idea, where we're leading to. Okay, so in order to really increase the insulin sensitivity, you got to eat more carbs. It needs to be greater than or equal to 70% of your diet, and then limiting the protein and fat to less than 15% of your total calorie per day. And this is one of the best ways to increase the insulin sensitivity. For some people, it doesn't make sense, right? They're trying to lower the blood sugar. However, we're telling you to eat more carb. Okay, I'm not telling you to eat the refined carb like sugar. It is more of the complex carbohydrate. But even you are eating a refined carb, the study have shown that you actually increase insulin sensitivity as long as you lower the fat in your diet. And so we've known since early 1900s, and I won't go through every single one of them, and multiple scientists and physicians at some of the most premier medical institutions have done the studies by actually elevating the carbohydrates and lowering the fat, that you can actually increase insulin sensitivity and decrease insulin resistance. And time again, and one of the earlier studies by Dr. Sansom was in 1926, and he studied 150 consecutive patients. And we have over time and time again have done the study that have demonstrated, but it frustrates me why we are constantly revisiting this and battling with the different kinds of fat diet. And lastly, Dr. Kapner, he even placed his patients on white rice, fruit juice, and a white sugar diet because he wanted to demonstrate, he almost eliminate all the fat. And some of it had to be processed because even things like beans and your vegetables have certain contents of fat. And so, but he wanted to demonstrate that eating mostly carbohydrate, you can actually reverse heart disease, kidney disease, high blood pressure, and also making somebody even insulin sensitive. Okay. And also, if you look at this study, Dr. Shintani, he did a great study looking at Hawaiian population. And these days, if you imagine Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders, you think about somebody who's very large or obese because there is a crisis of obesity within those islands. But it didn't used to be that way. And before the westernization of those islands, most people were very lean if you were eating the traditional Hawaiian diet. But most of the time, most of the food that they tend to eat are now, animal-based products or even mostly processed food. So what he did was he actually got a group of them, and then for 3 weeks he said you can eat as much as you want, no limitation on calories. Eat as much as you want. However, we're going back to traditional Hawaiian diet, which are mostly fruits and vegetables and starchy vegetables. And a lot of people think that if you're diabetic, you shouldn't be eating white potatoes. No, I mean, it didn't matter. And things like the taro and then sweet potatoes. And this is what happened. And you could eat as much as you want, but total calorie they consume per day was significantly less than what they began. And then also they all lost weight. Their cholesterol declined, their LDL improved, their triglyceride improved, and then also their blood sugar improved as well, and also their blood pressure. And they were completely satisfied because they could eat as much as they want, and it was mostly carbohydrate. And so that study was in 1991, and so he went back 10 years later and then repeated the study for another 21 days. But this time he also limited the fat to 12%. So it was unlimited amount of carbs. You can eat as much carb as you want, but limited the the fat to only 12%. And average weight loss was 10.8 pounds. The total cholesterol decreased from 205 to 157. Fasting blood glucose also declined to the normal level of 92. And then most people, if they were on diabetic medicine, were able to reduce the utilization of diabetic medication. Okay? So that's why we recommend greater than 70% of carbohydrates and then less than 15% of protein and 15% of fat. Okay, and also again now we're gonna shift to discussing the nitric oxide, and restoring the nitric oxide can significantly increase insulin sensitivity. As we discussed, as we age, we lose the ability to produce it, so we have to work really hard to really elevate the nitric oxide in our system. But then how do you go about doing that? There are two main pathways. There's nitrate pathway, which is a nutritional pathway, and then there's an endothelial pathway, which is the natural vascular pathway. Your blood cells develop, and not the blood cells, the blood vessels actually developing the nitric oxide. And how do you increase and elevate the nitric oxide? It's basically eating a lot more fruits, vegetables, whole grain, beans, and legumes. Okay, because all the plant food have the antioxidant, anti-inflammatories, and gives you also the vitamins and minerals and amino acids, the ingredients that you need in order to produce more nitric oxide. But it's especially the dark green leafy vegetables, and this is something that I dedicate within my diet every single day. I try to consume as much dark green leafy vegetable as possible, and then also almost with every meal I have a salad, and then also I have a green smoothie all throughout the day, and so that I can make sure that I can restore the nitric oxide level. I can never go back to where it was when I was 20 years old, but I can slow down the degradation and depletion of nitric oxide. And some of the food that has the highest concentration of the nitrate that helps you make nitric oxide are arugula, asparagus, beet green, beet, broccoli, cauliflower, collard green, kale, and spinach. All your favorite dark green leafy vegetables. And try to consume them as much as you can in your diet, and they'll help you elevate the nitric oxide. And for our both for our diabetic and heart patients, in order to reverse the heart disease, we follow also like Dr. Esselstyn's protocol, where we have people eat dark green leafy vegetables 6 to 7 times a day. Okay? And eating the food that looks like this, everyone thinks that when you eat low-fat, plant-based, whole food, that it's just a piece of lettuce, and that's not the case. And these are all the very colorful and the food that has a lot of a tremendous flavor. And these are the type of food that I eat every single day to restore nitric oxide, as well as optimizing my health. Okay, but if you want a little bit more details, so this is where we like to break down the food group in order to make yourself much more insulin sensitive, and then decreasing insulin resistance, and then decreasing the amount of fat inside your cell, and also elevating the nitric oxide in your system is by I have the thumbs up. You can eat as much as you want. There is no restriction. You can eat as much fruits as you want, even your type 1 diabetic. Okay? You can have any kind of fruit as much as you want. Green leafy vegetables, more the better. The thing about the green leafy vegetables is that it's such has a low calorie density. Even you eat quite a bit, it really doesn't hit, give you the satisfaction and giving you the satiety. And so we also really focus on eating the plant-based food that has a high in calorie density. Those are like the starchy vegetables, sweet potatoes and potatoes. Those are the starchy vegetables. Yes, even you're diabetic, you can eat them as much as you want. Okay? And your doctor and your family member may go, oh, well, that doesn't sound right. But all the studies have shown that starchy vegetables are very, very important. And also, of course, the legumes, beans, lentils, and peas. You can have as much as you want, whole grains, and non-starchy vegetables, of course, herbs and spices. And herbs and spices have tremendous amount of anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. And so add them to all your food as much as possible. And of course, the mushrooms. If you do consume mushrooms, you want to cook them lightly, so then you can deactivate the natural. And there's a little bit of a carcinogen on top of the mushroom, but as soon as you cook it, they disappear. But once you cook it, the mushroom becomes one of the best anti-cancer food also. So you can have as much as you want. Where it has the perplex look, the yellow light, these are a great plant-based food, but you also want to limit them because they're very high in fat. They're like such as nuts and seeds, avocados, and coconuts. You can have them, but just a limited amount. Same thing with the olives and pasta alternatives. And because all these have a much higher fat content. Remember, we said that we want a low-fat, a plant-based diet. And then also where we have the thumbs down, you want to eliminate them as much as possible. And some people may not do that completely, but for the best result, you want to eliminate them. But if you can't, make them into a much smaller portion. But dairy, eggs, all types of meat, whether it's processed red or white meat. And then also we want to avoid the oil of any kind, because oil is one of the most processed food, and then it's very dense with calorie, and also is very high in fat. A tablespoon of oil is 120 calories, and it's all fat, right? And so our goal to reverse insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes is to lower the fat, intracellular lipids inside the cell. So we want to avoid as much oil as possible. Okay. And we talked about the endothelial pathway, and the nitric oxide is produced in the inner lining. So we want to protect it as much as possible, and limit the damage to it. And so I know a lot of people already have atherosclerosis and heart disease, but we are also able to reverse that process. And if you're able to elevate the nitric oxide through nutritional pathway, then you're also going to stimulate the stem cells that is going to regenerate the damage, the inner lining within the artery, so that you can start to produce the nitric oxide again. Also, exercise is very important for nitric oxide production, because as the blood flows through your blood vessels, that shear stress stimulate the inner lining cells to produce more nitric oxide. And we'll also talk about how exercise is also very important in making you more insulin sensitive as well. So nitric oxide has many different roles, preventing cardiovascular disease, lowering the cholesterol, lowering hypertension, but it also is one of the best anti-aging molecule in our system. Also, briefly mentioned before, and the mitochondrial dysfunction also increase the insulin resistance. But nitric oxide, part of the reason is also the nitric oxide stimulate the mitochondria biogenesis. And without nitric oxide, you can't produce more mitochondria, and then you further become insulin resistance. And so nitric oxide plays a very important role in this aspect as well. And then also another way to help you become much more insulin sensitive and decrease insulin resistance is it's consuming as much antioxidant as possible. And some people may ask, what is antioxidant, right? And so basically what it is that it's a substance that helps you minimize the damage from the oxygen. We need oxygen, but oxygen also creates oxidative stress. Every day our cells are getting damaged. And so a simple way of describing it is you get a piece of apple, you slice it, let it sit there for a few hours, and then it turns brown, right? And that is essentially the oxidative stress. So antioxidants that we eat every day will help us prevent and minimize cellular damage. And so antioxidants is very important. And most of the antioxidants are within fruits and vegetables, right? And we measure antioxidant through something called ORAC score, or ORAC. And we know that blueberries and strawberries, different kinds of berries, have a lot of antioxidants. And they measure typically around 4,500. But then also I talked about herbs and spices like the ginger and turmeric. That's very high in antioxidant as well. And the turmeric measures about 120,000. But nothing is more antioxidant on this planet like Indian gooseberries, sometimes also referred to as AMLA. It measures over 260,000 ORAC score. And so it's essentially known as a king of antioxidants, and it's also known as a king of superfood. Only thing is AMLA tastes really bad. It's really sour. And even you make it into a powder, most people don't enjoy it because of the taste. However, it is one of the best food to consume because a lot of the studies have shown that it really helps you better manage diabetes and help you lower the fasting as well as post-meal a sugar level. Also, amla or Indian gooseberry powder have shown that it can lower the LDL, the bad cholesterol, just as well as statin drugs. And they have done multiple studies of that. And so it's very one of the best food that you can consume every single day. Okay, and so a few more studies to review. So this study was done at the NIH, comparing the low-fat plant-based diet versus the American Diabetic Association diet for type 2 diabetics. Okay, so basically, we're comparing the low-fat plant-based diet with the diet that is recommended by the Association for Diabetes. And this study was done for a 22-week study and then had a 1-year follow-up. And they measured the A1C, and the low-fat plant-based diet did significantly better in lowering the A1C for type 2 diabetics. Okay? But also, not only on A1C, but it also was significantly better in lowering the LDL cholesterol as well. So if the low-fat plant-based diet is better than the American Diabetic Association recommended diet, why isn't the American Diabetic Association recommending the best potential diet to help you reverse type 2 diabetes to the diabetic community, or even also teaching the physicians? Why is that, right? Well, there's a lot of different reasons, but that's beyond this webinar. Okay, so let me show you one of our webinar participant. And this is Rita, who's been an insulin-dependent type 2 diabetic for 13 years. And her A1C was so bad, it was at 12.5. Fasting glucose, which needs to be below 100, was at 280. And then the LDL was just off the chart. Okay? And she was on 2 different forms of insulin, and then also 3 different forms of oral medications, along with blood pressure medicine, cholesterol medicine, and so forth. Okay, and so and she's been doing this, being managed by her family practitioner for 13 years, and her condition just kept on getting worse every single year. So she came to us and she finally said, "Okay, I will do 100%, and follow your recommendation." And so when she did, within 10 days, not 10 months, 10 days, she was able to discontinue all her insulin. Okay? And her fasting glucose for the first time in 13 years went from 280 down to 72 to 84, the normal level for the first time in 13 years. Okay? That only took 10 days. And then within 2 weeks, she was able to cut her diabetic medicine by 50%. And within 7 weeks, she was able to completely reverse her type 2 diabetes. Not just type 2 diabetes, insulin-dependent type 2 diabetes. Okay? And so not everyone may be able to achieve this goal, but I could tell you that almost everyone, if you do it, then you're going to be significantly better. Okay? Another way to further assist making your body more insulin sensitive and reducing the insulin resistance is also participating in intermittent fasting. You may hear about this on the internet or different kinds of podcasts. And so essentially it is basically creating a negative calorie balance for so many hours each day. And one of the more popular one is fasting for 16 hours and eating everything, all your calories within 8 hours. Okay? And this is probably one of the better way of doing it and easier to manage. But if you can't do it for 16 hours, then you can do it for 14 hours or 12 hours, and 12 hours of fasting and 12 hours of eating. But if you think about it, that fasting time also includes a time when you are sleeping. And so if your last meal was at 6 p.m., then not eating until 8 a.m. So then you fasted for 14 hours. And there's a significant benefit for increasing insulin sensitivity. Because during that time when you're fasting and you're going through negative calorie balance, that you're able to burn more glucose and fatty acids, especially that fatty acid that we talked about, fat inside the cell, especially in the liver and muscle. And if you can get rid of those cells, the fat cells, then you can become much more insulin sensitive. And then also study have shown that it improves the function of the endothelial cells, the inner lining of your artery that releases the nitric oxide. Okay, so then by intermittent fasting, you can also increase more nitric oxide in your system. Also, it helps you reduce the LDL cholesterol. And then your gut bacteria and gut microbiome also needs to rest. You can't be constantly feeding them with food. And so intermittent fasting have shown that it also improves your gut health as well. And then also exercise. You can't outrun a bad diet, and the nutrition is the most important, but the exercise certainly enhance your insulin sensitivity and help you decrease insulin resistance. But also exercise increase the production of mitochondria also, just by merely moving your body, because your muscle realize it needs to create more energy. Then in order to do so, it needs to increase the number of the powerhouse within the cell. And by having more mitochondria, you can become much more insulin sensitive. And the study have shown that depending on the type of exercise you do, that you increase insulin increase the insulin sensitivity anywhere from 24 to 72 hours after you exercise. And so if you do cardiovascular exercises, it increases insulin sensitivity by 24 to 48 hours. If you lift heavy weight or more strengthening programs, then it can also last up to 72 hours. And the study have shown the best thing is doing is a combination of cardiovascular exercise as well as resistant exercises. Okay. And so again, finally, carbohydrate is not the problem, and you can't just focus on the blood sugar. The real problem of the diabetes is insulin resistance. And we know that we can prevent and then also reverse insulin resistance. And even for type 1 diabetics who lose the ability to produce insulin by decreasing insulin resistance and making them much more insulin sensitive, they will require significantly less insulin injections also. And their overall health will significantly improve as well. So that is the, in summary, so again, insulin resistance is a main problem in diabetes. And so we want to do everything we can to maximize the insulin sensitivity by decreasing the fat inside the cell, doing everything we can to elevate the nitric oxide, as well as elevating the mitochondria within our system, okay? And practicing things like intermittent fasting, and exercising on a regular basis can definitely help you increase the sensitivity. And in my opinion, one of the best way to optimize the health, not just to help prevent and reverse diabetes and prevent and reverse heart disease, but really optimizing our health is a low-fat, whole food, plant-based lifestyle. So if you have a further question, today, if you have questions, we're here. As long as you want to be here to answer your questions. And then also you can reach out to us to further ask any questions. For Neogen Nutrition, our social media sites, Neogen Nutrition, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. But also, if you want to inquire about our disease reversal program, you can send an email to neogenlife@gmail.com. Okay?
Yeah. Dr. Wan, I just want to say thanks for the presentation. Some really good information in there. We've got a few questions that have already popped up in the chat room. And so I'm just going to kind of go down the list. Patrick, why don't you go ahead and kick us off? You had a couple questions that you had typed into the chat. If you don't mind just asking those.
Okay. I guess my first one was, how is it that current practitioners who are treating, air quotes there, treating diabetes, don't know the root cause of diabetes? How can that be? I mean, I believe you, but it just is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is mind-boggling also. I was very embarrassed myself because, nutrition, medicine, there is none. There's no education in medical school. We learned about the pyramid in medical school. I think the 4 years I was in med school, we talked. There was about an hour lecture on nutrition. We always learn. We spent tremendous many hours memorizing all the different medications, pharmaceutical products to manage the disease. During residency, granted that mine was in surgical program, but we really didn't talk about nutrition. And then even cardiology programs, cardiology fellowships, majority of them don't even talk about nutrition either. And that's why, I listen to other physicians, advice, and I've gone through, before I became 100% whole food plant-based, I've gone through a low carb diet. I would, to get in shape, because, as I was aging, I was starting to gain weight. So then I would have, chicken breast for lunch and dinner, along with the, steamed broccoli. But I kept on gaining weight every single year. I wasn't losing weight, and I was more tired. I was limiting the carbs. And so I would get brain fogginess, and then I was fatigued. And even I was exercising on a regular basis, I didn't have the energy. But as soon as I switched to, I've done a lot of research before I changed. And, I was a vegetarian when I was in high school for a little bit. And then when I went to college, there was absolutely nothing for me to eat. So I went back to eating, meats and, like everyone else. But when I switched over to whole food plant-based, my brain fogginess disappeared. I quickly lost 25 to 30 pounds. And then now I'm nearing 50. I'm stronger than when I was in my 20s. When I was in my 20s, I couldn't even do 1 pull-ups, and I could do, significant amount now. But it's really unfortunate. And there's a lot of different societies that are trying to change the medical school curriculum from being so pharmaceutical based. But it is pretty unbelievable. And then, a lot of physicians, even the endocrinologists, really think that, well, when you eat carbs, please make sure you have plenty of protein so that it slows down the absorption of blood sugar. And then when I ask them, so what makes you say that? What paper can you cite that actually states that in order to slow down to lower the blood sugar, that they should be actually eating protein along with carbohydrate? They can't, because they got it from bro science, right? They got it.
What are the CE credit requirements for maintaining a practice? How many CE credits are required a year, and is there any requirement that it be over different subjects outside of your specialty?
No, unfortunately, it's not. It's the CE credit for, we call it CME, continuing medical education, is 24 hours each year. However, it's not a specialty or subject specific. As long as you do those hours, you submit them to the state, then the state said, okay, you fulfill the requirement. That is it. And then they don't require a specific subject matters. Those are the things that some of the leaders are working to, like the Physician Committee for Responsible Medicine, are changing. They have to, like for example, if 11 out of 12 committee members for USDA were paid consultants to the pharmaceutical or animal-based food companies, and they were significantly obviously biased. So once they sued them and won, and then now no one on the committee member can have any financial relationship with the industries. And so the changes are coming, but very slow. Obviously, as I share with you, some of these the diabetic studies were done early as 1920s. And when I started reading those articles, I was just like mind blown. And I said, why didn't we learn about these studies when I was in medical school? So, because I used to think also, it's just like everyone else in med school, is the consumption of too much refined carbs is the cause of the diabetes, which is actually completely wrong. And then now the true scientific community have proven that fact. So, but hopefully the changes will keep coming. And that's why we're trying to, when I learned this, I was actually angry at the medical community and medical education. And I was truly embarrassed. And that's why we started the free webinars. And before free webinars, we used to host free seminars at our hospital. We started about 3 years ago because I felt like we really need to share this knowledge, because only you can make the change. And physicians cannot change, like I talk about overflowing sink, right? And then physicians are mopping the floor of the overflowing sink. Only person who can close the faucet is yourself, because you have the control of your own body. So that's why we're doing these webinars.
Yeah.
Real quick, Patrick, I know you have a couple questions. There's a few people with a few questions, so I'll come back to you to get to the rest of those.
Sure.
I want to shift over to John Alcala. I hope I'm pronouncing everyone's names correctly, but John, you had a question in the chat about nitric oxide. If you don't mind asking that question for the group, but then also you had an interesting comment in relation to your experience with intermittent fasting. I don't know if you mind sharing a little bit about that as well.
No, not at all. I've known Dr. Juan for a while now. I've been to one of his free seminars when he had the hospital there in Plano. And I try to follow as much as I could. Of course, I would lag off a little bit and would eat, a little bit of meat here and there and a couple of dairy products. But for the most part, I would try to do my best. And then I kind of learned about intermittent fasting. And I did the 16-8. I drank lots of water during the time I wasn't eating. And it worked for me, along with whole plant-based. And I lost 40 pounds. And also the question I had was about how do you restore nitric oxide? But actually he answered that question after I asked. So I know about the green leafy vegetables.
Yeah, great. Well, congratulations. It's really great seeing you again. And thanks for joining us. And congrats on the weight loss. And because also, losing weight will definitely help us also to become much more insulin sensitive and fighting off the diabetes. And so, excellent. Congrats. And so, yeah, as we already discussed, one of the best way to increase the nitric oxide is eating as much dark green leafy vegetables, but it disappears so fast out of our system. And so that's why, for especially cardiovascular patients, you got to consume it all throughout the day. So.
Yeah, if you don't mind me asking, John, on your weight loss, was that all diet exclusively, or were you working out as well? Or
actually, I did very little walking. That was about all. I didn't do no exercises, just walking, and that wasn't every day. It was just basically water fasting, intermittent fasting with lots of water during those 16 hours of not eating. And I did use the 6 to 7 hours of sleeping. Mm-hmm. But other than, because I would stop at 6:30 and don't eat nothing until 10:30 or 11 o'clock the next day.
Yeah.
And it helped a lot.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned something great. The sleeping 7 to 8 hours a day will help you lose weight as well. And that's something that a lot of people don't know about. And a lot of people have difficulty sleeping. And we actually have a presentation on how to lose weight without, dieting and eating as much as you want. And it all becomes about the calorie density. But the slide that I showed you with the green, yellow, and red, it's the same thing. If you eat everything in the green, you can eat as much as you want. And most people fail in dieting is because they get hungry. If you get hungry, most people tend to fail. It doesn't last. And so by eating, as much as you want of the food that has a lower calorie density, you can be full. You can eat greater amount of volume of food, but still lose the weight. So once again, congrats.
Thank you. And I would like to add that also, since doing this, my appetite has significantly been lowered. Sometimes I only eat one time a day during those 8 hours. So I don't know. I guess it's because of stomach shrinking. I'm not sure what it is. or the medication I'm taking. I won't know anything. The last time I went to see my doctor, he said that my what's it called, the LC1, A1C was down significantly. It went from a 9 to a little bit over a 6. So,
wow, good. You're almost there. Congrats.
Yeah,
that's great.
Another 40 pounds, I'm hoping.
Yeah. You can do it. You can do it.
I think that's awesome. That's really great. We're going to shift over to Connie. I believe I'm saying that correct. Connie, you want to chime in? You had a few questions in the chat that you had typed in. I don't know if you would like to address a couple of those.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to find out if you can successfully reverse the diabetes, or kind of make it go away completely, or is just maintaining and managing it?
Great question. What we're talking about is definitely reversing the type 2 diabetes. Of course, type 1 diabetes is different because you've done the damage, and then you know most of the people have lost the beta cells, and so you can't, most of the time, you can't restore them. However, for type 2 diabetics, you can definitely reverse it. But of course, if you go back eating the way you did and then living that sedentary lifestyle, then of course, because it's the diabetes is really a lifestyle disease, right? And so if you go back, then of course it's going to come back. But if you continue to live the low fat, plant-based diet lifestyle, then you have the great chance of reversing it. Almost everyone is able to. And there are certain people who've gone so far, and then they may need a little bit of a medication management. But our mission is to reverse it, not just managing the disease with drugs. And you can do that purely through a diet and lifestyle. So you have to want to do it. If you want to do it, then just like anything, you have to work at it, and you're going to get as much out of it as you put into it. And so the most important thing is the diet, the food itself. And no matter how much you exercise, unless you change your nutrition, you will never be able to lose the weight, because exercising helps it enhance it. However, it's 90% all diet. Okay. All right.
Okay.
And any other questions?
Yeah, we're going to shift over to, and I'm going to I'm not sure, Nyasha Moyo, do you have the ability to turn your audio on? I saw you had put a question into the chat room.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. No, the thing is, I think Mr. Jones, who answered first, actually did answer my question. I was asking about drinking water during the fasting period. And from what I heard, what he said, he's talking about you can still drink water while it's fasting. I don't know if what he's saying, what you guys are saying.
Yes, a very good question. Yes, you can definitely drink water during the fasting. So yeah, you can drink as much water as you want. And also, even during the day, I typically recommend people drinking about a gallon of water per day. And so, while you're awake, at least drink a cup of water every hour. And then that becomes, on average, about a gallon. And so, I carry I don't know, you guys can't quite see it, but this is my gallon of water that I carry around every day. I'm almost there. And so, I highly recommend drinking. And I have actually another webinar participant. Only change he actually made was drinking a gallon of water per day, because, he wasn't fully committed. And he said he was busy, so he couldn't change the diet. The only thing he did was adding a gallon of water. And then in span of 10 days, he lost about 5 pounds. So everything, you got to use all different means possible. But water is, one of the best things that you need to be adding to your diet every single day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nyasha.
My pleasure.
Hey, Linda Pert, I saw you had a question about anti-inflammatory foods. Do you mind asking that?
Yes, I just wanted to know how it sort of related, like, what are the good foods to eat to prevent inflammation? And I guess it's a complicated structure that we have in our tissues, and I don't know how it ties into the topic and having more or less insulin resistance.
Yeah, a very good question. It's very important also. It is very complex. However, the inflammation, especially the chronic inflammation, I mean, our body does need acute inflammation in order to repair and regenerate the damaged tissues. However, when we talk about inflammation, we're talking about chronic inflammation and that low-grade inflammation that everyone has. And so by eating certain type of processed food, certain type of animal-based products, and certain type of activities, smoking and the different type of lifestyle, not sleeping, and that can also increase inflammation. But the chronic inflammation is also part of the root cause of most of the chronic disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune disease. So we want to do everything we can to lower the chronic low-grade inflammation that we have in our system. And so the anti-inflammatory food is essentially all plant-based food, especially when it's raw. It's anti-inflammatory. It has one of the best sources of anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. And then, things that are very, very colorful, has a lot of antioxidants. However, of those groups, things that are most has the anti-inflammatory properties are things like the herbs and spices. And so at our house, we have 40 different types of, spices, and some of them I don't even know what they are. But my wife put it together into all the different, types. And then when I cook, sometimes I just bring out the tray and I don't even know what they are, but I add them to the dishes and it just comes out perfect. But the spices themselves and herbs has a great amount of anti-inflammatory properties. Things I talk about, I try to add, garlic every day. I try to add, turmeric, onion, and paprika, cumin, coriander, all those type of spices every day, and into to my meals. And then also I add, of course, things like turmeric, amla, and then ginger into my smoothie and a daily drink. It's very difficult to eat as much green as you really need each day. So what I also do is I make, I call it anti-cancer super smoothie. And we can certainly provide the ingredients to you guys. And it has about 18 different ingredients. And then I try to drink a significant portion of it throughout the day. That really also is consuming a lot of fiber and then restoring the gut microbiome. That also helps you decrease the inflammation. So there's really no one magic. It's multiple things that you have to do. And believe me, if you don't get everything, today, that's okay. That's why, we repeat the webinars and you have to hear the same thing, multiple times before it really sinks in. But focusing on a lot of those food that provides an anti-inflammation would be really, really beneficial. And then also will help decrease insulin resistance also.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully that answers your question.
The only follow-up would be I started having the apple cider vinegar in the morning. Mm-hmm. And it seems to help, but I'm not sure how else to have it. Like, do you add it in a smoothie too, or do you just keep drinking it separately in water?
Yeah, so you can drink that throughout the day if you like. That's what I do. That's part of my protocol each morning. Also, when I wake up, one of the first thing that I do is actually, tablespoon of apple cider vinegar mixed in with the water, and that's what I drink. And then, there's certain supplements that I also take in the morning also. It's not necessarily because it's an apple cider vinegar, but it's really because it's a vinegar. And so you can use any a vinegar you want, but let's say throughout the day, if I'm having a salad, then I add, like balsamic vinegar, right? Because vinegar themselves also stimulate the enzyme that produces the nitric oxide. And also helps you increase your metabolism also. So the vinegar is also one of the way to boost your metabolism to help you lose weight, and also helps you improve your endothelial function that produces the nitric oxide. That also lowers your blood pressure, increases the blood flow, right? And then that boosts the energy. So that's something that I do myself, and I certainly recommend. But it is, as long as you're doing, throughout the day, in the morning, you may do apple cider vinegar. For lunch, when you're having a salad, then you can add balsamic vinegar, not vinaigrette, because vinaigrette has oil in it, right? And then, at dinner, then you can also make different kinds of, salad dressing, with the different form of vinegar in it, or you can use a balsamic vinegar again also. So. And some people in the morning use like either lemon, they squeeze a lemon juice or lime juice, mix it with water. Essentially, you're doing the same thing.
Okay, so I'm going to switch over to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, I saw you in the chat if you want to chime in.
Yes, so I've been following a whole food plant-based diet for 2 years now, and I've really liked it. But I have had a hard time keeping my blood sugars within range, and wanted your advice on that. I felt like I needed to lower my carbohydrates just to get them in line again. But I know you speak against lowering the carbohydrates, but I'm just wondering if you could advise on that. Also, my weight is very low. My body fat is extremely low, and I've been losing more weight. So trying to, cut out the carbs. So it's just, I'm kind of having a rough time with that right now.
Yeah. So what kind of things were you eating when you say low fat, whole food, plant-based diet?
Lots and lots of fruits and vegetables, beans, rice, trying to think, oats, those things were all included in there. Yeah.
How are they typically prepared? When you do the whole grains, the grains like rice, were they white rice? Were they, like brown rice, or were they whole grains?
Usually brown rice. We also did the whole grain, the whole oat groat. I'd either do or a steel cut, sometimes rolled, but usually the more intact grains. I tried to do those. Yeah.
Okay. And then how did you typically prepare the meal? Did you use any oil, no oil?
No.
Was they mostly raw, or were they cooked?
We have some raw and some cooked most every meal, but no oil. At one point, I realized that I've raised it since then, but at one point I realized that my fat intake was at like 7%. And I thought, I felt that was too low. And I was losing weight then too. And then I was able to gain some weight back. But now that I'm lowering the carbs, trying to manage the blood glucose, now my weight's going down again. So. Yeah.
Are you on any medications?
No.
Yeah. And so you're not on any medication, but what's your blood sugar? Did your doctor diagnose you with type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes?
Well, I actually haven't had the diagnosis of diabetes, but because my endocrinologist said that my blood sugar goes back down. And so he said, although I see quite a few numbers over 200, it will go back down eventually. And so he said, well, you don't really, and I did wear a CGM for, a week or so, care, and it showed, up to 200. It peaks after my meal, half an hour after my meal. So, his advice was just to, kind of watch those meals. In other words, lower the carb, I think was what he was getting at. But he was very, he liked the whole food plant-based diet too. And he's like, oh yeah, I tried to tell my patients this, but he was just saying, watch those meals. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to, but I keep going over, and I have a lot of neuropathy as well. So I really feel like I need to watch the blood sugar, because it seems that much worse when I have the neuropathy seems that much worse when I'm having the high blood sugars.
Yeah. So I think, when you say lowering, it's not, throughout the day when you eat, of course, your blood sugar is going to rise, right? And then, so it's not going to stay constant every single moment of the day. And also depending on when you take it, before, after, during the meals, and then, how many hours after, it's going to constantly fluctuate. And then also the amount of raw type of whole food plant-based food that you eat versus cooked, and then how you prepare them. And so, I'm more than happy to also go over those details with you. And if you want to reach out to us on the email, because yours may be a little bit more specific. And so I don't want to take too much time from the others. And so, because you may just need to fine tune it. But however, overall, I think, you're doing really well. I mean, even though that, you're eating whole food, but if you take the blood sugar level immediately after you eat, it can go up to 200. But as long as it comes down, and then, your fasting glucose level versus your, 2-hour post meal, those are the things that you have to measure. And then it sounded like your endocrinologist saw your, continuous, glucose monitoring level, and it wasn't too concerned. And so there's a lot of other things that you could do to adjust your, diet. And then especially also if you have neuropathy, but you're not diabetic, but then it may not necessarily be related to diabetes. There's many other reasons why you can also have polyneuropathy also. So if you want to reach out, I'd be more than happy to chat with you about it, and then give you our thoughts.
Okay. How do I do that? Do I email you?
We can send everyone an email again at the end. We had a screen. It's neogenlife@gmail.com. So T can write it in the chat section. So neogenlife@gmail.com, and that's an email that you can reach out to us.
I just put that in the chat for you.
Okay, so basically you think it's okay if it does go over 200 as long as it comes back down within the designated time?
Yeah. After you eat, your blood sugar may rise depending on what you happen to be eating, and also what you eat the specific carbs with. And so, you can't monitor it every single hour because it's going to fluctuate. And what we want to see is be average, and then also see what your A1C is. And because that is essentially giving you the average of what it's been over the past 3 months, right? And so sometimes over micromanaging it's just going to stress you out. And we want to look at the bigger picture and look at the forest, right? And so, but it sounds like I definitely would like to gather more information, but it sounds like you're doing pretty well. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Very nice. Tootsie, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? And I'm not sure Tootsie has the ability to turn their mic on. So looks like they do. So are you there? So I'm not sure if their microphone's working. It looks like they tried to turn it on, but I'll go ahead and ask it for you. If you're able to mic on, then go for it. But it said that on their last doctor's visit, they were told to increase the amount of pills that they were taking. But they said their AC is down from 7.4 to 6.1. So I was wondering why I should increase my pills, yet it's going down.
Yeah, so what to see mean is that A1C went from 7.4 to 6.1. Well, that's great. You're definitely going the right direction. You're almost there, so keep going. But regarding your medications, you definitely want to talk to your doctor about why, because I think you may want to try to bring you to a normal level. And I think that's what he's trying to do. However, I don't know if you started making changes to your diet or not. Because if so, you want to always let them know, hey, I'm about to do a whole food plant-based diet, or I've already changed it, and letting them know so then they don't overprescribe. That's something that I don't know if you have already made the changes to your diet or not. But I think one of the reasons why they may be wanting to increase the doses to bring you down to the normal level. But you want to specifically ask him why you should, because you have every reason to ask your doctor why, right? Why do you want me to increase my medication when my A1C has been improving, right? But from the very limited information that I'm gathering, it's probably because he or she may be still adjusting the medication to bring it to the normal level. But also I would challenge you to really consider doing a whole food plant-based, low-fat whole food plant-based, so that you can bring it down more naturally without having to increase the medication, because the ultimate goal is for you to discontinue all the medications. As you saw of our example, like Rita, who was able to completely reverse her type 2 diabetes, insulin-dependent type 2 diabetes, within 7 weeks. And it's pretty amazing. For most people, it happens quickly. And some people, it may take a longer time. But for a majority of people, they see within 6 weeks a significant difference. So I think you need to have a conversation with your physician. Okay?
Cool. Patrick, I'm swinging back over to you.
All right, Patrick.
Sorry, you're muted right now, Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick, you have a great mic there, but we can't hear you.
Okay. Trying to make sure we don't have any kids' noise coming from my place.
Yeah.
You talked about your interest in longevity, and then there's been some talk about various fasting protocols here tonight. And so I was wondering if you're familiar with and what you think of Dr. Walter Longo's fasting mimicking diet protocol.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think everyone should consider doing, the intermittent fasting. True intermittent fasting is really doing it for about 4 to 5 days. And then what we talked about, 16 to 8 is technically, time restricted eating. But I think the community has put the intermittent fasting as any kind of fasting. So, but Walter Longo, what he done was to make it easy for people. He created a package of a plant-based meal for 5 days. First day of 1,100 calories, and after that about 800 calories. And the main goal was that we know that if you do water fasting for 5 days, which is very, very difficult for many people, that by day 3 you start to go into autophagy. So what that is that your body starts to degrade injured or damaged cells, the cells that are not functioning normally. And then it's almost like going to a junkyard and taking out the parts of the good parts and then reassembling it. And then also basically killing up all the damaged cells. And so that is a true cellular detoxification. Like a lot of people say, hey, I want to do this detox, a juice detox. I don't know actually what they're talking about. except for making you go to the bathroom. Okay, but if you want to do detox, that is a true cellular detoxification. You can only achieve that through fasting. And then you got to do it for about minimum 5 days. And if you can do up to 5 days at home, if you're going to do anything longer than that, you really need to be at monitored facility. But also at the same time, what they found was that Walter Longo's the fast mimicking kit, it costs approximately $350. And so instead of doing that, if you just eat a salad without oil and with limiting the amount of fat, so not really adding a lot of avocados and nuts and seeds and things like that, but if you just do the general salad for about 5 days, on average, that comes up to about 500 to 800 calories per day. And that has a very similar result as actually doing his fast mimicking diet. And early studies have shown that it creates the autophagy almost as good as doing a water fasting for 5 days. And so, of course, he doesn't have as a long of a study than some of the water fasting. But, if you can't do pure water fasting for 5 days, I think doing some form of a fast mimicking diet, it's very helpful. If you don't have any specific disease, some people do it like, once a month, but that can be a lot for some people. So if you're healthy and want to optimize your health, doing it once or twice a year, it's great. If you're trying to reverse a certain disease, like let's say you have a high blood pressure, fasting does wonders for high blood pressure. You have cardiovascular disease, you have autoimmune disease, and then most of the other chronic disease, then you may want to do it more frequently until you can really reverse them. But I am a huge fan because there's it's evidence-based. Everything we talk about is, we're not really talking about anecdotal results. We want to really focus on things that have been studied, and the fasting is one of the best things that you could do. And also for longevity, that calorie restrictions. And there's, multiple studies that have done that if you do calorie restriction for 10%, and based on animal-based studies, that you're going to live 10% longer. If you do 20% longer, and it goes up to about 50%. Anything more than that, then you really become, deficient in a lot of nutrients. But also then you got to consider, well, do I want to be eating only, 40% less every single day? That becomes a lifestyle issue. And so there are other things that you can do to make up for it. But, I really believe in calorie restriction. But if you do whole food plant-based, I don't know if you were able to, I went through the slide very fast where, Dr. Shintani's study, before the amount of calorie people ate before the study, and then after, on average, the participants were eating about 2,800 calories per day. And then during the study, the participant can eat as much as they want, but they were averaging about 1,600 calories per day. So they were actually doing 20% calorie deprivation, right? But they were still full, right? Because they could eat as much as they want. So it's a type of food that you eat. That's why whole food plant-based is almost like calorie restriction without having to deprive of yourself the volume of food.
So with the Longo protocol, the FMD, I don't have any diseases I'm trying to reverse, but I'm just interested in the longevity. And so maybe twice a year or something like that. Mm-hmm. My concern would be weight loss. I don't want to lose any weight. I stuff myself every day to try to maintain the weight I have. Yeah. And so would that protocol add or create weight loss for, 1 week, twice a year?
Yeah, I think if you do once or twice a year, I think you're going to be fine. Yeah. I mean, initially you are going to, obviously during the fasting period, you're going to lose weight, but most people tend to, gain it back pretty quickly. So,
yeah. And that's kind of the whole point of it, isn't it? Is when you get through and you eat again, that you rebuild the cells that were scavenged in the autophagy. And and build yourself a new heart, a new liver, or whatever it is that's been damaged throughout your life.
Yes, because it has shown to really activate the stem cells, right?
Yes.
About anti-aging is really about how well are you able to activate the stem cells that you have in your body, awakening them again. And so it has the ability to do so, not only the autophagy, getting rid of the damaged cells, but also reactivating the stem cells so that it can rebuild properly. So yeah, you absolutely, you have a great knowledge in it. And then it's something that I do, once or twice a year.
Oh, you do?
And so,
that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so afterwards, do you have to kind of eat a bunch of avocados and walnuts or something to build your weight back up?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been just, gradually would get it back up. But then I tend to rely a lot I eat a lot of starchy vegetables. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have, because I love sweet potatoes, and it also has a lot of different antioxidants. And so we always have either steamed or boiled sweet potatoes. Mm-hmm. Like just even tonight, right before this, I had a, sweet potato that was about this big as a snack. And it gives you need to eat things that are calorie dense. So eating a lot of, sweet potatoes or potatoes, starchy vegetables, beans and lentils and grains, those tend to have more, they're calorie dense. And of course, the nuts and seeds. And if you don't have any cardiovascular disease and if you don't have issues with the weight, you can certainly eat more nuts and seeds, and then also healthy fat, like, from, avocado, to regain the weight.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Sure. Great question. Love it.
Let's go over to John. John, you just had a question in the chat. Why don't you ask that for us?
Sure. I just want to know if someone is diabetic, can they do that 4 to 5 day fast, just taking water?
Yeah, so if you're diabetic, you definitely should consult with your physician about managing. It depends whether you're on insulin or you're not on insulin, you're on oral medications or not, and you probably want to be monitored. And even doing intermittent fasting or time restricted eating like 16-8, you definitely do want them to know, because you obviously don't want to be taking insulin while you're fasting. And so you're going to become hypoglycemic. So you do need to manage it. But we do know diabetics who do intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, as well as 5 days of, water fasting or fast mimicking diet, under the supervision of their physician who is managing their medication. So you definitely can. Okay. There's also some people, there are different centers across the country. One of the best one is True North in California, where some people go there for 30 days and they do water fasting for 30 days. And they've been able to reverse cancers and, hypertension, cardiovascular disease. It's a fantastic center, and they've done a lot of research at the True North. But definitely, if you're going to do anything greater than 5 days, you definitely need to be supervised.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
Another thing I always think is cool is when people share their personal experiences. Vera, would you mind just chiming in and share a little bit about your mom's experience with diabetes and plant-based diet? I'm assuming her microphone works. It might not. Vera, I'm going to go ahead and share for you what she said. So Vera typed in the chat that, yes, type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease that can be easily reversed. My 69-year-old mom reversed her type 2 diabetes with a plant-based diet. Her A1C went from 12 to 5.1 in 6 months, and she went off of her medications.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And then Linda, I see that you were asking, do you want to elaborate on your last question, Linda, in regards to carbs and proteins in the diet?
Yes, I guess my doctor had said I should eat protein with every meal, and it's best to combine protein and carbs. So that's what I was doing. Thanks.
Yeah. A great question. I think I mentioned it to you because one of our patients also stated the same thing. And I know other endocrinologists who always say you should have carbs. And if you're going to have carbs, always have protein, because their justification is that it will slow down the digestion. And that's the when I said, well, show me the study where it actually shows that and there's any health benefit, and there really isn't. And so it's, I don't necessarily, if you want to have, when you're having carbs, I mean, almost everything has carbs and protein, right? Your vegetables have carbs, protein, and fat. Even your fruit, not a lot, but also has protein. And your beans certainly has carbs and protein. Your potatoes has carbs and protein. So then sometimes I ask them also, what do you mean I should have protein with my carbs? Because my sweet potato has protein in it, right? And so when people think that a protein, they think it's like chicken breast or something. But almost everything that you eat, it has a different amount, but it has carbs, it has fat, even vegetables, they all have fat, right? In different degree, it also has protein. And so I tell people just, to keep it as simple as possible, just like I laid out, green, yellow, and red light. And some of the other nutritionists do the same thing. But anything that's in the green, you can have it as much as you want, anytime you want. And so you don't have to have it along with other protein, because then I always ask, even when I go to the restaurant, just to give the waiter and waitress a hard time, I order a salad and then they always ask, hey, would you like to have a protein with it? I go, what do you mean protein? And doesn't my salad already have protein in it? Because it has like nuts and seeds, right? And then they don't know what to say. But so I don't think you necessarily need to make a great effort of adding some form of a protein with your carbohydrate. Just eat that are in the green section, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Nice. Well, is there anybody else? We've gone through all the questions in the chat. Is there anybody else that had any questions before we get going?
I got one quick one, talking about the yellow and green lights on your food chart. I noticed sprouted bread was in the yellow, and just curious, Alvarado Street or Ezekiel breads, I've always thought those would be in the green. What's in
so I eat, we have Ezekiel bread also. Before that, we used to have Dave's Killer Bread. It broke my heart when they sold the company and the new company start adding oil to the bread. I don't know why they had to add oil, because it tasted fantastic before. So we have gone back to the Ezekiel bread, but it's still processed. And so, and when it's processed and it is still refined, and so it's like the sugar, your body does absorb them much faster. Okay. And so, going back to the Linda's question, when the doctor says you should have the carbs with the protein, instead, what they should say is eat the carbs that has intact fiber in it, right? So which means that's a whole food. And so that's the only reason why, like the pasta, for example, is in the yellow section. And, and pasta is processed. However, the studies show that because it's dense, it does break down slower. So your blood sugar doesn't really spike as much. And so same thing with even the sprouted bread. It is refined. So it doesn't have as much intact fiber. So it does spike your blood sugar level more than things that are in the green section, and so that's why it's in the yellow. Also, I don't know if everyone noticed. I want to make sure that some people, to replace sugar, they use also artificial sweetener. Artificial sweetener damages your gut microbiome, and then in long run, it has shown that it can actually induce insulin resistance. So definitely avoid any kind of artificial sweetener also.
Would you also differentiate between whole wheat pasta and regular pasta, or does it make a big difference?
Yes, a very good question. And so you got to turn the package over every single time, because, up in the front marketing, it may say it's a, whole wheat, right? But you also want to, even if it's a pasta, you want to make sure it only has one ingredient, right? The whole wheat. And because a lot of times they say whole wheat, all that means is that they have a whole wheat as an ingredient, and then it may be a third or fourth ingredient. And so the whole wheat pasta that we purchase only has one ingredient, which is a whole wheat.
Yeah, but assuming it is truly whole one ingredient wheat pasta, is that significantly better than refined pasta or not?
Yeah, it does. I believe it is better because it doesn't, elevate the blood sugar as much. That's why we always recommend the whole wheat and that to be the only ingredient.
But still, in the yellow column, is limit it and don't go wild on it.
Yeah, it's if it's in the pasta section, yeah. If it's because it is it is still refined and somewhat processed. That's why for diabetics to reverse it, we put it in the yellow section. And so if you don't have diabetes, insulin resistance, then you can certainly do more, and it's probably somewhere between the green and the yellow light. And then the ones that the way we lay things out, this is really for people who have insulin resistance and who wants to reverse it.
Yeah. Okay.
And so even for myself, I don't have any issues with the insulin resistance, and I love pasta. I just love it. But I do try to limit it for a few times a week.
Yeah. Okay. So if you really want your wheat, just eat some wheat berries, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then also, if you love pasta, there's so many different types of pastas you can get these days, right? And then you can, get the pasta that's made with black beans, or you can make it, there's a chickpeas and so many different variety.
Yeah.
It still gives you that same texture.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Patrick, if you check out our most recent recipe video, it is a zucchini noodle dish.
So okay.
There's some creative things that you can do with that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody else? John, go for it.
Where do you get the recipe for the zucchini pasta?
You'll see it go out. All our recipes go on the website, and then also our social media. The recap email that you'll get this week, on Tuesday, kind of highlighting what we talked about today. You'll see a link in that email as well for that recipe. But we have a library on neogennutrition.com that we've been building up over the last several months. And so we film those, document them, put the instructions together. We have a plant-based chef that we work with on that. And it's a great resource. There's snacks, there's lunch, dinner options, all types of meals where it shows you that plant-based cooking can be easy, and it can also be absolutely delicious as well.
Is this also on the Facebook group page?
On the Neogen Nutrition Facebook page, and then on the Neogen Nutrition Instagram page as well. You'll always see it. The videos are usually about a minute to a minute and a half. And then we always either, whether you're looking on the website or you're on a social media page, in the comments and the description, you'll see the step-by-step text-based instructions on how to make all those meals. you can use the video to kind of follow along and give you a quick preview of what that process looks like.
Thank you.
And I think your new website's coming soon, right, T?
Yeah. So we're going to be launching the brand new version. I hope it's this week. We're just waiting on one last thing to get finished. But I think this week we'll be launching the new website for neogennutrition.com. It's very visually driven. There's a lot of great resources on there, from the recipes to also some great nutritional blogs that Dr. Juan has been writing. The next one I think that you're putting out is the vitamin D and how that relates to COVID-19. And so the website is something that will be evolving, but you really want it to be a resource. It's always a resource for the community. So whether that be nutritional information, research, scientific studies, papers, the recipes, obviously along with the product as well, we want it to be a resource that is always available to the entire community. So it'll continue to grow and evolve, but you'll see an announcement, like I said, hopefully this week about the new website. When it goes up, we'd love for you to check it out and let us know what you think about it.
Yeah, that's just like T mentioned. We also play some on the blogs. We talked about like how nitric oxide affects insulin resistance, and then also we adding blogs about how to prevent cardiovascular disease. The next article that will be hopefully be completed and then loaded on the website by next week. How vitamin D plays a very important role in your optimizing your immune system. So that's something that I certainly recommend, that most people are spending the majority of their time inside, and most people are insufficient of their vitamin D. So I definitely recommend taking vitamin D every day, which I do myself. If you also have a dark skin, it becomes even more important because you are about 25 times more likely to develop vitamin D insufficiency compared to somebody who has lighter skin. So.
Okay. It looks like John, we got another question from John in the chat. John, go for it.
Yeah, I had heard that if you prepare white potatoes, you bake it or whatever like that, or boil them, and then you let them cool down. Say you don't eat all of it, you have leftovers or whatever like that, they develop resistant starch, which is supposed to be, I guess, good for you. If you reheat it back up, does that starch get unreversed kind of thing, or does it flip back the other way or not? Does anybody know? Yeah.
I don't think so. I tried to keep things very simple as much as possible. I basically say, eat them whichever way you want to eat them, because eating is better than not eating them, right? And then I think most of the plant-based lifestyle medicine physicians pretty much agree. We can definitely talk about how much it increases the resistant starch or not, and then whether to cook them, whether to steam them or microwave them, or bake them or boil them. But I think that the most important thing is eat them way you like it. As long as you're not cooking them in oil, eat them way you like it, because the difference is not that significant one way versus the other. So I like steaming and then or sometimes boiling, because it makes the skin softer, because I always, the skin has the most amount of nutrients, and then also has the most amount of fiber. And my goal is for each day to consume at least 60 grams of fiber, and hitting that 100 grams of fiber per day. That's my goal, but I just don't eat enough to hit that number. But fiber is something that I always try to count as much as possible. And so, but eat them, eat variety. I always say eat 30 different kinds of plants every week, because you also want the diversity of microbiome. And one of the best way to achieve that is by eating wide variety of plant food. And I think that's the most important thing. And, if you want to count, I try to eat 5 servings of fruits every day, at least 5 to 7 servings of vegetables every day, at least 3 servings of beans every day, and then 3 servings of whole grains every day, and then servings of nuts and seeds every day. So you can also get that if you want an app to help you count. You can also download Nutrition Facts by Dr. Michael Greger. He put an app together so you can count the type of food group. But and generally after a while you get used to them. But I love the fruits and vegetables, beans and lentils and whole grains. So I don't really need to count. But eat them any way you want to eat them.
Okay, great. Is there any other questions that we want to get to? Looks like that's it.
Yeah, just thank you, Dr. Juan, for putting this together.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Patrick, for joining again. Really, love your questions, and then same for the others also. And we, as long as people want to, we would love to host this on a regular basis, so we can share ideas. And so really appreciate you guys taking the time to join us. And again, feel free to make comments or ask questions or like and share the things that we create for our social media. And if you have any other further questions, feel free to also reach out to us on email.
Very good. And guys, just a reminder, we'll be sending out on Tuesday a recap email. Fingers crossed everything went great with the recording. You'll have a link to check out this entire presentation again. And then we'll also have the newest recipe video link for you in that email as well. And you can always reply back to those emails. So if that's an easy way to do it, if you want to reach back out to us. But thank you all tonight. Hope you have a great rest of your holiday weekend. And we'll see you in another 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.